Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 34 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Thanks for listening. This week we're talking with the great Nick Searcy, the Justified standout who directed the upcoming Gosnell feature film. But before that chat, I wanted to break down the chaos surrounding a new HBO project from the team behind Game of Thrones. The show is called Confederate, and it's not out yet, not coming soon, it's just in the earliest stages of production. It imagines a world in which the South successfully seceded from the United States and kept slavery legal through modern times. Yes, in this alternate world, slavery is still around, still legal, still a part of the South, and the North and the South are still at war with each other. Now that set off a liberal battle cry unlike any I've seen in quite some time. Why? Well, David Benioff and D.W. Weiss are both white, and they'll be telling a story about slavery in the 21st century. In some circles, that's just not acceptable. White storytellers cannot tell a slavery-themed narrative. It's offensive. It's white-splaining. Maybe it's worse. Suffice to say, it's not woke. I say that's dumbassery, to quote my radio chum Michael Brown. Since when are writers restricted to sharing stories based solely on their own life experiences? Well, since 2017. It's a terrible trend. If any pair of TV producers have earned the right to tell a challenging story in their own way, in their own voice, it's Benioff and Weiss. They've created the most popular show of the past 5 years, 10 years, maybe even since The Sopranos. Game of Thrones is huge. It's a cultural phenomenon. That speaks to their talent, period. Well, shouldn't we trust them to tell a new story? Must we now put up restrictions on who can tell what story? And who sets those rules? And why? It's depressing, but hardly unexpected. What the duo should do is come out and say, hey, judge us by our work. The show is nowhere near completion. For now, we're going to just gently tune everyone out, go back to work, make the show, and then when it comes out, let's have this discussion again. Of course, they won't do that. Matter of fact, as of this recording, HBO trotted out 2 fellow producers on the upcoming show, both of whom are black, to do a little PR damage control. You know, that shouldn't really be necessary. If this whole thing is downright Orwellian, only news outlets are too busy trying to tie President Trump to 1984 to really notice.
I am Groot, and you are listening to my daddy's podcast.
Thanks, Ben. This week's HiT tip of the week is Killing Ground. The video-on-demand title follows a pair of lovebirds attempting a romantic camping trip. Well, not so fast. There are some locals in these woods, and they've got other ideas, and soon these lovers are running for their lives. This is the latest take on one of those Lost in the Woods genre, and I gotta say, I love these movies. Think about Blue Jay or Backcountry, the latter being a great example of it, although there weren't locals to worry about. It's just one big, bad, mean bear. This Aussie import is shocking at times, and I thought one scene really kind of went over the top. It seemed like it was too cruel for its own good. And sometimes the film's ambitions don't quite match up with reality. There's a final scene that made me think, and then wonder, I don't think this is really well earned. But this is still smart, intense storytelling, well crafted, and it'll have you engage right through that final moment. And that's more than enough for me. And by the way, while you're streaming Killing Ground, or before, or even after, why not give this new Hollywood in Toto story a read? It's my take on a female film critic blasting her male critics for daring to dislike The Beguiled. That was the movie directed by Sofia Coppola about a bunch of women who take in a Union soldier who's been wounded. Well, some male critics just didn't like it. They had very logical, rational reasons why they didn't like it. Well, that wasn't good enough for this film critic, who was a veteran film critic from, I believe, one of the Philadelphia papers. Well, I set her straight in this new story. Check it out at HollywoodInToto.com. Just put Beguiled in the search box and you'll find it.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
Now let's get to this week's interview. Nick Searcy didn't get his big acting break until his early 30s, but this late bloomer has made the most of his time since then. He's appeared in movies like Fried Green Tomatoes, Castaway, and 1 Hour Photo, in tons and tons of TV projects too. But of course, his work on Justified on FX is a personal favorite. Great role, great series. If you missed it, well, start the binging right after you listen to this podcast. Nick has a number of other acting gigs coming soon, but he also recently took a turn behind the scenes. He's the director of the upcoming Gosnell movie, which sparked one of the most successful crowdfunding campaigns in modern memory. Oh, and by the way, if you're not following Yes Nick Searcy on Twitter, well, you should. He's probably the feistiest conservative on Twitter, and maybe the funniest. Here's my chat with the great Nick Searcy. Well, first of all, thank you, Nick, for joining the show. You know, I know that you worked on the stage for a while in your 20s, and I'm kind of curious, at that time when Hollywood wasn't biting quite yet, was there the sense you might give up on it? Were you determined? And what was Days of Thunder the big break that you needed, or was there something else that happened before then?
Well, just to clarify, you're talking about my 20s and not the 1920s, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I was in New York for most of my 20s. That's where I met my wife, and most of what I did there was theater. I didn't really get anything started until I was about 31 in terms of doing TV and film. So I did do an awful lot of plays. When my wife, when we turned up pregnant, we got married in 1986, and in 1989, when we were pregnant with Chloe, we decided to move out of New York, and I was sort of looking at life a little more soberly then and thinking, well, maybe this acting thing's not for me. And I was looking at going back to grad school and maybe getting an English degree and teaching English or something, but I wound up getting a little agent in North Carolina. We moved back to North Carolina, and just so happened at that time the movies were shooting in North Carolina, quite a few of them, and they were casting locally for a lot of the day players and the smaller parts. So I wound up getting a series of these pretty good parts in big movies. I mean, small parts in pretty big movies like Days of Thunder, Prince of Tides, and so on. And then the Days of Thunder role actually led to me being able to audition for Fried Green Tomatoes, which I read for a small part. John Avnet jumped me up to the main bad guy. And when I did that and that movie was such a hit, that sort of gave me enough of a profile that I could move to LA and start a career. So, yeah, I sort of was thinking of giving up when we moved back to North Carolina. But as it happened, God was looking out for me. And that was actually the right move career-wise for me.
Gotcha. They often say that people, when they work on the stage, it helps their training, that prepares them for future work. Did you find that all that, even though you were looking for your big break, the stage work really kind of was the foundation for you, or is that more of a cliche and just the skill is the skill?
No, I don't think it's a cliche at all. I mean, I think just the act of doing theater teaches you so much about how an audience responds to you. You sort of get to hone your craft in real time. You get immediate feedback on all of it. And I don't think there's any real replacement for that. I mean, even now, even though the world has changed so much and everybody's getting cash out of YouTube videos that have 10 million hits or something, I always tell kids that, want to know how they can be an actor. I tell them the first thing you should do is just do as many plays as you possibly can get your hands on, because that's the best way to learn how to act. It's I still, this past year, I've been able to do 2 equity, professional theater productions, which is the first time I've done theater in 20 years. And man, it was fun. I remembered while I was doing it why I fell in love with acting, and it was because of acting in the theater.
Gotcha. I'd be remiss not to ask at least one question about Justified. To me, the show offered such a rich look at the South, the modern South, and I think a lot of shows, TV shows, movies don't have that. Was that a collaborative effort on the set? I mean, I'm sure it flowed from the writing, but were there folks like yourself who have sort of a Southern background who were able to kind of nudge things along the way? Talk a little bit of that, because I think that's one of the most amazing things about the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the general attitude from Graham Yost and all the writers was that we want to make a show about the South where everybody's not a stereotype, where you have even the bad guys are smart, and, it's not just a bunch of dumb rednecks. And that they were definitely open to allowing us to play with the dialogue and improvise here and there. And Oliphant is big on that, and I'm certainly big on that because I barely read scripts at all. I just sort of make it up as I go. But I'm just kidding. But we were able to add some things, and I was able to throw in a few kind of colorful comments that I remembered my father saying to me, or my grandfather, or whatever. And so, yeah, we were able to kind of shape the show quite a bit and give it some authenticity and some reality. But the original writing, I'm not trying to say it was far off. I mean, you're working with really good writing and then just enhancing it a little bit here and there.
When you think about Justified, I think it's a great example of what they're now calling peak TV, this golden age we're dealing with. Now, as someone who's been working in TV and movies from the 90s till now, what changed? What brought this about? I mean, there's still great movies being made, but these TV shows are incredible and rich, and there's just chock full of great characters. We didn't really have that. I didn't have that when I was a kid growing up at all. What evolved? Is it competition? Is it letting the artists kind of run free and be who they can be? From your perspective, what have you seen that's changed in the industry that allowed all these great shows to kind of blossom?
Well, I think it's kind of basically that the money's gone out of movies. I mean, the only way you can make pretty good money on a consistent basis anymore is in television, because the movies are now either it's Spider-Man or you make $1.50. It's like it's kind of evolved to this point where everything's got to be a Marvel Comics movie or else you're an art house film. And so a lot of the people that, if you're a big, huge movie star like, Hanks or McConaughey or Tom Cruise, you can make your living doing only movies. But if you're not one of those guys, you're not going to make your living that way. You're going to be better off making television.
I think when you look at some actors, when you look at your credits, you're not above the title. You're the kind of actor who's going to work until you're 95. Is there something about being a character actor, being sort of in that sort of just below the A-list that you kind of relish in a way? I mean, there's less pressure. You don't have to worry about sort of the box office weekend. I mean, it's about crews. It's you're the guy who makes the shows better and the movies better. Talk about sort of being in that sort of arena.
Well, first of all, how dare you imply that I'm not on the A-list? But second of all, I remember doing a TV movie in 1992 or so, right after Fried Green Tomatoes had come out. I kind of had a little bit of a career, and I did this TV movie called Nightmare in Columbia County with William Devane. And William Devane is just one of the funniest men I've ever had the chance to work with. And he said to me on the set one day, Nick, you ugly guys, you're going to work forever. It's us good-looking bastards that have it tough, And so I've always remembered that, and it is sort of, it does have its frustrations. Of course, you don't get to do everything that you want to do, and sometimes the roles that you get are maybe not as much fun as you would like to have, but there is a certain consistency to being able to fold into different projects. And I don't have to worry about the ramifications so much of should I really do this role or not? How's this going to impact my career? It's sort of, I don't think about things on those terms because I don't have to. If a role is presented to me and it looks like something that'd be fun to do, I just do it. I don't have to worry about, is this the right step in my career?
I remember years ago I interviewed William H. Macy, and the way he responded to me was like he was still nervous about his next role, even though he's the kind of guy who works constantly, does great work. Do you still have that sort of hunger where I looked at your resume, like every year there are multiple projects, and yet I guess it's always an actor worrying about the next gig, or do you you just know that my work speaks for itself, my body of work will be there, and the industry knows that, hey, I'm good. I can handle these things.
I think that's built into almost every actor, especially if you're the kind of actor that came up in the theater world. I think William H. Macy did. I did. You're kind of, those years of scrambling kind of never leave you because you're going from audition to audition and you're hoping you get this and you're hoping you get that. And you never know where your next thing is coming from. And I just think that's built in, unless you're, unless you have an incredibly different experience, unless you're discovered at age 18 and then, like Sean Penn or something, and you just make movie after movie after movie. I think a lot of us have that idea. I mean, I just wrapped a movie that shot in Atlanta last week, and first thing I said to my wife when I got off the plane was, "Well, I guess that's it. I guess the career's over now. I'll finish that one. That's it."
I was reading where you said that the death of Andrew Breitbart really had an impact on not just you, but your voice in social media and just in general. That you were more willing to kind of embrace your ideology, and of course, you're loads of fun to follow on Twitter. Can you talk a little bit about that more? And do you wish you had been more open earlier, or do you think that the timing is right for you?
Well, and I think the thing that about Andrew's passing is, like, I had admired him so much because he was sort of so fearless in taking everybody on, and I was never like exactly quiet about what I thought, but I just wasn't, I just didn't. I mean, I told people to ask me, and it's just after he passed, I just, I looked around. This was 2012, and I sort of felt very strongly that what was happening in the country, the sort of leftward tilt of everything, was damaging. And I thought, well, what am I waiting for? Why am I afraid of these people? And I don't know how long I have on this planet, and why am I keeping my mouth shut? I'm just going to say what I think, and I'm not going to be afraid of it. And it was kind of a minor shift in me, but it was definitely a shift. Gotcha.
When you think about, there's often stories about Hollywood conservatives who don't say who they are and don't share opinions. I know an actor who I've talked with him before. And he says, just don't share my ideology. I don't want it to be known. I could get in trouble. And yet people like you and John Voight and maybe James Woods is possibly another example. You guys work all the time. Are you the exceptions to the rule, or is it really tough for people who are right of center to get gigs? I mean, what's it like today with Trump in office?
Well, I think it's probably harder today than it has ever been with Trump in office. I mean, I appreciate you're being very complimentary and saying that I work all the time. But, there's a lot of things that I don't do that I sort of feel like sometimes, why am I not doing that? And I don't know. I mean, I have no firsthand knowledge that I have ever been rejected for something because of my ideology or because I'm not a Democrat. I have no way to verify that, but I don't know how much I would be getting if I was a Democrat. But I do. I know plenty of actors who come to me and say, boy, I feel the same way you do, but I'm not going to open my mouth. I know what'll happen to me, and who am I to say that they're wrong? I mean, and sometimes when they tell me that stuff, I think, well, I must be some kind of an idiot. Maybe I should keep my mouth shut. But I'm just kind of not built that way, and I've kind of reached the point where I don't really care. Like you said, I work plenty. I do enough, and if I'm going to be denied a role by somebody because they don't like the fact that I wouldn't vote for Hillary, then I probably won't enjoy working with that person anyway.
Uh-huh. One of the things about Hollywood is that bad news is news. Johnny Depp says something stupid, it gets all the headlines. And then I'm sure there are lots and lots of examples of actors doing good work, giving a lot of money to charities. I'm kind of curious, just as being in the industry, what have you kind of witnessed, or is there a quick story you can share about a really kind of a nice, decent moment with your colleagues or things you've seen? Kind of just, I'd like to kind of share some brightness about Hollywood, as well as sort of, kind of piling on when the news cycle gets kind of crazy.
Well, I mean, I personally rarely have a bad experience on a set. I mean, I've never been, in terms of when I've worked, no one's ever accosted me or said something to me about any stance I've taken publicly or anything I've ever said or done. I mean, I just got done working on a movie called Best of Enemies with Sam Rockwell and Taraji Parker, and down in Atlanta, and it's a movie about the civil rights movement, about integrating the school system in North Carolina in 1971, and I just had a fabulous time. Sam Rockwell and I got along really well, and I had a lot of laughs with him, and Taraji was great, and the whole experience was wonderful. I just didn't. I don't go to work and try to talk politics with everybody like I'm on Crossfire. That's not why we're there. We're there to make movies, and we're all privileged in this way to be paid to do this thing that we would all do for free because we love it so much.
Yeah.
And so I just try to enjoy that, and it's just life's too short. I don't talk politics at work.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Gosnell movie project. This is you. You're the director of the film. To me, it strikes me as the kind of story that, boy, how could Hollywood have not made this movie? It's dramatic. It's frightening. It's ripped from the headlines. What can you tell people about the film and sort of your experience? This is your second time, I believe, as a director, right?
Yeah. The movie's it's a really taut little thriller. It moves very quickly, and the thing I'm proudest of about the movie is that it really can be watched by either side. It's not a movie that tells you what to think about this issue. It just sort of tells you what happened in this particular case, and it just lays out the facts, and you're allowed to make your own value judgments about it. And that was really important to me. I didn't want to make a movie that would say this is only for people who on this side of the aisle. You other people are not going to like it, and I think we were successful in that. And the acting's terrific, and it really is an impactful film. I hope it gets out there and that people can see it.
After your first film, the first directorial effort you made, you said, "Oh, that's a lot of work. I kind of like the acting gig." Did you have a similar experience here, or did it kind of rekindle maybe an interest in directing where you might want to do this down the road?
Yeah, this time I did sort of enjoy just the actual directing of it more. I mean, there's always frustrations, especially when you're working with this kind of budget. It's just hard to get what you want when you only have a limited amount of money. But I'm sure that Robert Zemeckis feels that way too. I'm sure that every director on every level feels that way. But yeah, I mean, it made me think about, this is more fulfilling to me at this time in my life. It's like, I think one of the things that happens as an actor when you get older, or at least in my case, is like sometimes the roles become sort of similar, or they're like roles that you've done before. And it's maybe not quite as interesting as it was when you were in your 20s and 30s, because the things you're being asked to do are, hey, we need an old man. Let's call Nick Searcy, So yeah, I'm developing two different projects right now that hopefully I'm going to be directing sometime in the next couple of years, and both of them are very different, and I'm really excited about them. So yeah, it did sort of make me want to direct some more.
Gotcha. I was looking at some of your, I guess, projects either coming out this year or next year. One of them, I hope I get the title right, is 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri.
Yeah.
And that's from the director of In Bruges, right?
Yeah.
Bruges. Talk a little bit about that, because I loved his work, and I was kind of curious how you'll be put a part of this film.
Well, it's basically a cameo. The way this film came about was that 3 Billboards was shot actually in my hometown in North Carolina, in Sylva, North Carolina. And my mother called me up and basically said, they're shooting this movie here in town. You ought to see if you can get a part in that. Then you could come home for a while. So I called my agent and I said, look, if there's anything in this movie, I'll do it. It's shooting in my hometown. And, basically I have one scene in the movie with Frances McDormand. And it's a great little scene, but that's it. It's a cameo, and I got to go home. But it was, Martin's a great, great writer and director, and Frances is terrific in this movie. And actually Sam Rockwell's in this movie too, who I just worked with in Best of Enemies. So I'm really excited about it, even though my participation in this movie is limited. In fact, if you've seen the trailer, I'm in the trailer. That's about my entire role. If you're going to see the movie for me, just watch the trailer.
You mentioned your mom, and you mentioned also your father, how kind of you used a little bit his sort of nuances and Justified. Is there anything sort of about your upbringing that you think has kind of helped your career, either work ethic or just ambition or abilities? Because I mean, I think actors have a very unique skill set, and I often think their parents are a part of that, or at least a part of that success story.
My father is one of the funniest men I've ever known in my life. He always made me laugh. He always made everybody else laugh. He's just a very funny person. And my mother was a school teacher and kind of in that way a performer. She's also got a great sense of humor. I think a lot of that rubbed off on me. Also, a lot of my extended family, like my uncles and my cousins, are all ministers. They're all preachers. For a long time when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be a preacher. And then later on, I realized it's like they're up on stage talking and people are listening to them. That's really what I like about that. So it just, there was that kind of performance kind of thing was in my family, even though no one was a professional actor. Nobody in my extended family had ever been an actor. And so it was completely crazy when I told them that's what I wanted to do. But they were all supportive of it. And, I told my mom it was her fault because my whole life she kept telling me from the time I was a baby that I could do anything that I wanted to do. And so when I decided I wanted to be an actor, she said, I didn't mean that.
Well, she gets all the blame. Well,
Yeah.
Nick, before we let you go, we ask all of our guests at the Hollywood in Toto podcast what they're watching these days, what they're listening to, maybe books on their nightstand, just kind of content tips, because there's so much content out there. I think we all kind of need a tip or two. Anything you can recommend that you're kind of checking out or binging, as they say?
Well, strangely enough, I'm a professional wrestling fan, so I always keep up with the weekly soap opera on Monday Night Raw and SmackDown. But I just recently watched the Glow series because I'm a wrestling fan, and because I actually personally know some of the people that helped start that show back in the 80s. So it was kind of interesting to me, and I watched the whole thing. And I've also been sort of binging on Elia Kazan movies. I got a collection of his film for Christmas, and somebody gave me his biography, and so I've kind of been reading that. And I'm also reading David Limbaugh's The True Jesus right now, which is a really nice book, sort of a convergence of the Gospels. And that's about it. Most of my time these days, I'm working on this script, though. I'm trying to polish this script with my partner by the end of next week, so that I can direct again.
All righty. Well, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Of course, Nick Searcy, great actor. So many movies, too many to count, but if you have to look, maybe Fried Green Tomatoes is sort of a signature moment, perhaps. New movies coming soon, The Best of Enemies, The Shape of Water, and, of course, Gosnell coming very soon. So thank you, Nick. We appreciate your time, and maybe we can check in down the road.
Thanks, Christian. Good to talk.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.